Hello and welcome back to the Crime Reel. For today's true crime narration, we shall be looking at the case of Barbara Forrest and the alarming similarities between her case and that of Mary Ashford, which took place some 157 years earlier. For those of you who have come over from Briefcase, a very warm welcome to you, and for those of you who haven't, I would highly recommend that after watching this video you head on over to his channel to listen to his narration about the case of Mary Ashford. There will be a link in the description and also a pinned post. Both of these cases are equally tragic, and I'm sure you will be as shocked as I was when hearing about all of the similarities between these two crimes that took place over a century and a half apart. In February 1974, 20-year-old Barbara Forrest moved out of her family home on Pen Green Lane in Corby, Northamptonshire, which she shared with her parents Gordon and Marguerite and her sister Erica. Barbara had recently finished a college course in Northampton and had secured a job as a child care officer at the Pipe Hayes Children's Home on Chester Road in Erdington, Birmingham. Together with many of her co-workers, she lived in a large house at the children's home, which was used as a dormitory by the staff. Barbara was a very religious young lady. She was a member of St Mark's Lutheran Church in Cars Lane and the National Secretary of the Lutheran Church Youth Movement. It was through the church that she met her boyfriend, 21-year-old Simon Belcher, who was the son of the local church minister, Peter Belcher. Barbara was a popular member of staff at the children's home and had settled in well to her new life away from her family home. However, in May of 1974, a colleague remembered Barbara saying that, "This is going to be my unlucky month, I just know it, don't ask me why." Unfortunately for Barbara, this prediction proved to be true. On Sunday the 26th of May 1974, her boyfriend Simon was asked to stand in for his father, and with Barbara's help, they held the Sunday service at St Mark's Church. The following day was a bank holiday in England, so that evening Barbara and Simon decided to go out to some pubs and then onto a disco in Soho Road, Handsworth. At the end of the evening, at around 1 a.m, Simon walked Barbara to the Colmore Circus bus stop, kissed her goodbye and left to catch a different bus home. Barbara was never seen alive again. At approximately 6:45 p.m, on 4th of June 1974, Barbara's partially clothed body was found covered with twigs and leaves in a shallow ditch in Pipe Hayes Park. This was just a few metres from Chester Road and just a few hundred metres from the children's home where Barbara lived and worked. Her body was spotted by a local man who was out walking his dog. The man then rushed across Chester Road to an off-licence, whereupon the owner, Mr. E. Jones, called 999. Barbara's body was removed at around 9:30 that evening and then taken to the Newton Street mortuary for a post-mortem to be performed. Items of clothing and other objects were also removed from the scene for further investigation. The police believed that Barbara's attacker may have used the trees at the edge of the park to conceal himself before pouncing on Barbara as she returned home. She was then sexually assaulted and strangled. More than 100 police officers, headed by Detective Superintendent Mick Lenihan, were involved in the search for her killer. Bus passengers were interviewed, extensive house-to-house inquiries were made, and hundreds of posters were put up in the local area. In the hope of jogging someone's memory, a Sutton Coldfield police officer, Linda Madison, who looked quite like Barbara, posed for press photographs, wearing clothes similar to the ones that Barbara had been wearing at the time of her disappearance. She was wearing a blue evening dress and a turquoise coat. It was established that when Simon and Barbara had walked to the bus stop that night, they had spoken to a smartly dressed middle-aged man to ask if they were in the correct place to catch the number 67 bus. Multiple attempts to trace this man led nowhere. The driver of the 1 a.m. number 67 bus, Mr. Harold Watts, said that he could remember Barbara's face but could not say with certainty that she had boarded his bus that morning. 2 weeks after the murder, the inquiry was still wide open, and a reconstruction of Barbara's last known movements was completed in the hope of generating more leads. At the end of July 1974, 2 months after Barbara's murder, it was reported that the police were draining the lake in the park that led to dozens of detectives spending weeks trawling through the mud there. A senior officer was quoted as saying, "We are looking for a certain object which we cannot account for after making exhaustive inquiries. I'm afraid I cannot say more than that." The investigation eventually led to one of Barbara's co-workers, 38-year-old care worker Michael Ian Thornton. He was eventually arrested and charged with her murder on the 5th of September 1974. Michael remained in custody until his trial began on the 10th of March 1975. He denied killing Barbara. The prosecution stated that whilst there were no eyewitnesses to the killing, there was compelling evidence which is not capable of any rational explanation other than that he was responsible for her death. They presented evidence that Barbara had sustained a ferocious attack that would have resulted in her attacker having a lot of blood on his person. The prosecution then stated that when Michael's trousers had been examined, despite them having been dry cleaned, they showed small spots of blood. They claimed that Michael had been making an unscheduled trip to the care home when he saw Barbara returning from her night out and had then attacked her. Michael had previously told the police that he was at home with his mother at the time of the murder, but this alibi proved to be false. On the 7th day of the trial, the judge directed the jury members to return a not guilty verdict after hearing that all of the evidence against Michael was merely circumstantial and that there was nothing that directly linked him to the crime. He was acquitted on the 18th of March 1975. No other arrests have been made, and the case remains cold to this day. In 2012, Barbara's sister, Erica, called for a new police investigation in the hope of finally bringing her sister's killer to justice. She questioned why evidence gathered at the scene had not been re-examined for DNA and why a cold case review hadn't been undertaken. A West Midlands police spokesman said that whilst the police could not comment over whether relevant DNA from the case still existed, he stated that there are no further forensic opportunities to explore. 63-year-old Erica stated that there definitely would have had samples from the crime scene, and if they had been lost, then the family was entitled to know. Her parents, 88-year-old Marguerite and 91-year-old Gordon, clung to the hope that their daughter's killer would one day be brought to justice. In late 2012, Barbara's family were informed that the items related to Barbara's case could not be found, and it is believed that they, along with many other vital pieces of evidence that had been stored at the police's Bourneville Lane base, were thrown out during a reorganisation of the force in the mid-1990s. Without these items available, it would be impossible to find Barbara's killer, and her parents went to their graves, having never achieved their wish that their daughter's killer would be punished for his crime. The similarities between Barbara's murder and that of Mary Ashford 157 years earlier are truly eerie. Minor similarities soon turn into extreme coincidences that have led some to believe that the paranormal may have been at work here. Both Barbara and Mary were 20-year-old women who lived in Erdington, Birmingham, and they even shared a birthday. They had both expressed concern that something bad was going to happen to them shortly before they were murdered. Both young women enjoyed dancing and going out with friends, which is exactly what they were both doing on the night before they were killed. Barbara and Mary were murdered in the same manner, both sexually assaulted, then strangled, and their bodies abandoned in the early hours of May 27th. Their bodies were found in Pipe Hayes Park, just a few hundred metres from each other. Bizarrely, the person accused of the murders had the same surname in each case, Thornton, and at both trials the accused was found not guilty due to a lack of substantial evidence. Both Mary and Barbara's siblings were not convinced by the finding of the court, and both demanded further investigation. Despite this, no one was ever convicted for either murder, and both cases remain unsolved. Please remember there will be a link to take you to Briefcase's video if you didn't watch that one first. Please add any comments down below, and thanks very much for listening to the Crime Reel. Stay safe. Goodbye. Psst. Just a small detail about where Barbara grew up in Corby in North Hants. It used to be referred to as Little Scotland, as many people from Scotland relocated in the 1930s due to a huge steelworks plant being built there. Goodbye.